we're coming back from closed session. And Johanna, you bring us back from closed session.
Thank you, Chair. Direction was provided, no reportable action.
Okay. So with that, the special meeting is closed. And now I'm going to open up the regular meeting agenda for the Clean Energy Alliance for October 31st, 2024. And Kaylin, will you call the roll, please?
Board Member Garcia.
Here.
Board Member Becker. Here. Board Member Musgrove.
Here.
Alternate Board Member Joyce.
Present.
Board Member Bhat Patel.
Here.
Vice Chair Melendez. Here. Chair Drucker.
Here, Priya, will you explain why you are remote today?
Yes, I am participating under the Just Cause provisions due to an illness.
Very good. Eric, will you lead us in the pledge?
All right, ready?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Are there any board comments or announcements? Okay. Are there any members of the public, Kaylin, that would like to speak to us on items that are not on the agenda?
We do have one speaker, Lane Stewart.
Good afternoon, board. My name is Lane Stewart. I live at 425 South Tremont Street here in Oceanside, and I saw these legal notices in the Union Tribune regarding today's meeting. My concerns were regarding the wholesale market access tariff to raise the per kilowatt price from up 10 cents. And the reason I bring that up is because in the business I managed, I've been purchasing electricity through a third market provider since 2001 when it was first deregulated. The company is called Direct Energy, and since we don't have this, I cannot show you it, but I've been purchasing energy at a base rate of a little over 6 cents a kilowatt hour, 724 and 5-year contract blocks. It just went up in August of this year to about 6.7 cents a kilowatt hour. And that's what I pay. And then of course I pay the San Diego gas transportation transmission charges. So my concern is I can do this for a commercial account. Why are the rates changing for residential and commercial accounts under this program provided by the Clean Energy Alliance? And that's my concern. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Are there any other members of the public that would like to make comment on non-agenda items?
We do not have any other speakers.
Okay, next is approval of minutes. Is there a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
Okay. Kaylin, will you please call the roll?
Board Member Garcia.
Aye.
Yes.
Board Member Musgrove.
Aye.
Alternate Board Member Joyce. Board Member Bhat Patel.
Aye.
Vice Chair Melendez.
Aye.
Chair Drucker.
Yes. Okay, next is supposed to be a presentation to get rid of me, but you got me for one more month. Sorry. So with that, we're going to go on to the consent calendar. Okay. Kaylin, will you please read the items on the consent calendar?
Yes, thank you. Item 1, Clean Energy Alliance Treasurer's Report for August 2024.
Are there any items that anybody would like to remove or add to the consent calendar? Are there any members of the public that wanted to speak on items on the consent calendar?
We do not have any speakers for item 1.
Then I will entertain a motion.
Move to approve.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Board Member Garcia.
Yes.
Board Member Musgrove.
Aye.
Board Member Bhat Patel.
Aye.
Alternate Board Member Joyce. Vice Chair Melendez.
Aye.
Chair Drucker.
Yes. Okay, now we go on to reports. Greg, you're up.
Thank you, Chair, members of the board. First, we are going to start with our CEO presentation. This is not working. Can somebody advance the slides for me? Thank you. So just as a regular update, this is an overview of community events that the staff has been participating in, as well as an update on enrollment. We are now at full enrollment with the exception of net energy metering customers that are still enrolling prior to and at their true update. And give you an update also on the Solar Plus. As you can see here, there's a list of activities that our staff has been participating in. We are quite active still through the month of October. And as you can see here, some of our staff attended this week the CAISO Stakeholder Symposium, which was a really important conference, as well as last week we had the Association for Women in Environmental and Energy Association, that conference, which was real beneficial for some of our staff. And you can see there some of the other city council presentations we've had. Here are some upcoming events that we will be participating in as well. This is just indicative of some of the things we are planning. I think at this time of year, things tend to slow down a little bit with the holidays, but as you can see, we are going to be touring the Dr. Bronner's facility. They are at a Green Impact Champion, and we're looking forward to that, as well as a PUNC, Power Association of California, fireside chat that's happening on November 20th, and in December we will be engaging with many of our member cities on various holiday events, including tree lighting ceremonies. Here is the overview of the last enrollment for Oceanside and Vista. As you can see, we're now up to 95.1% participation rate. And then you can see there the opt-outs and the total number of eligible customers, and the opt-downs to the 50% renewable, as well as the opt-ups. And total number of opt-outs right now are just about 5,200 out of the 106,600 estimated accounts. Here you can see the breakdown of enrollment by member agency, both with the opt-down and opt-up, as well as the default accounts, which is obviously the highest number. Encouraged to see the number of Green Impact Champion opt-ups still going up, so at about 891. So our Solar Plus update, we are at 19 enrolled contracts as of October 16th. You can see the breakdown there by member city, and happy to report that we now have 2 systems that are installed and live. One in Vista, one in Carlsbad. 3 systems are on the verge of going live. And as I mentioned in prior updates, we are expanding to channel partners, meaning we are expanding the program to a number of contractors that will be able to provide this service to our customers. And we expect when that happens that the number of enrollments will go up dramatically. We expect to bring those documents to the board for consideration at the meeting in November. And so that will coincide with our marketing expansion as well. So it's taken some time to get through those documents and get them in line. And as part of that, we're also, as I mentioned in the prior reports, expanding this to SCHIP funding for lower income households, so we can get some enrollment with our lower income individuals and customers in the service territory. So that'll be coming forward as well with this package of updates to the Solar Plus program. And that concludes the CEO report.
Thank you, Greg. Any questions for Greg? Any members of the public that would like to speak on this item?
We do not have any public speakers.
There's no action on this, so next we go on to public hearing. Item 3, which is amending Clean Energy Alliance rate schedule to add wholesale market access tariff rate. So I assume you're up, Greg?
Yep, thank you, Chair, members of the board. This is a public hearing to set the rate of the wholesale market access tariff. And the objective here is to conduct the public hearing, take testimony, and to consider approval of Resolution 2024-018 that would amend the Clean Energy Alliance rate schedule to add this wholesale market access tariff effective January 1st. So just going to review this in general, that this program was established by the board in October of last year. And the intent here is to, the board approved terms and conditions and rate calculation specified that a future public hearing would be held to set that rate. We've been working with one of the eligible customers, non-residential customers, Channel Side, the desalination plant, since the approval of the program, to establish portfolio needs, costs, and what that wholesale market access tariff should be. As a reminder, this is for large non-residential customers, so large consuming loads, and the idea here is to set a tariff rate for customers, and the eligibility is at least 150 gigawatt hours per year. So that's quite a bit of energy. Keeping in mind, Channel Side is roughly 10% of our total load for the whole service territory. So that's a large customer. And the idea here was to avoid a potential impact on our budget and procurement needs with an opt-out of a customer of this size. We decided to set this wholesale market access tariff to allow for protection of other customers, which could be impacted from a cost perspective if we had that kind of huge load depart from our service. So this tariff was set up particularly in mind with those large customers. And I do appreciate the comments of the gentleman who spoke earlier. I would venture to guess that this will not be a tariff rate for the size of the business. I can't say for sure because I'm not sure what that size and load of that customer is, but this is really targeted at large consumers of energy. As you can imagine, if we had a 10% of our load decide to opt out at any one time, that would be a major hit to our portfolio, especially since we procure that energy in advance. So that's what this WMAT rate was established for. And the WMAT rate not only includes the cost for energy, but it also includes costs for administrative oversight, legal costs, and other staff costs that would be used for managing the portfolio as well as providing the energy to that customer. So based on the work we've done in assessing the portfolio needs, the energy needs, we've established that rate at $0.10150 or 10.15 cents per kilowatt hour. This policy or this rate will be applicable, as I mentioned, on January 1st of 2025. As required by statute. We did notice this hearing in the San Diego Union Tribune on October 18th and October 15th, and the rate is set to cover the costs of the procurement needs for this wholesale market access tariff, as well as CEA administration costs and reserves. So that is what the rate was set for, and happy to answer any questions. And that concludes the report.
Thank you, Greg. Are there any questions for Greg?
I did want to clarify. So that rate that Channel Side will be getting that's a better rate than they would have gotten from SDG&E.
At this point, the cost savings that have been provided by that customer demonstrate a cost savings over SDG&E. Yes.
Very good. Thanks.
Other questions?
Do we have any other customers in our portfolio that come close to that 10%?
We likely do. We haven't identified them yet, but we likely do. I can't say right offhand what those customers are, but my guess is yes, we do have some. Quite a few. There's not a lot.
Other questions? Okay, so with that, I'm going to open up the public hearing. Are there any members of the public that wish to speak on this matter?
I do not have any public speakers for this item.
Very good. Then I'm going to close the public hearing and open it up for board discussion. Any comments? Then I'm prepared to have a motion.
I'll move to approve.
Second.
You've got that, Kaylin? So I will just, in order to, so that this isn't just deaf ears here, appreciate Greg and Dan for you negotiating this rate. It is going to provide a huge savings to the desal plant, which in turn will have some impact, not a whole lot, but some impact on the water bills that we pay, because that water does go into the county water authority, and that's where we buy all of our water. So that's a win-win for everybody, it seems. But don't expect your water bills to go down tomorrow morning. So with that, Galen, will you call the roll?
Yes, thank you. Board Member Garcia. Board Member Becker.
Yes.
Board Member Musgrove.
Aye.
Alternate Board Member Joyce. Board Member Bhat Patel.
Aye.
Vice Chair Melendez.
Aye.
Chair Druker.
Yes. Okay, now we're going on to new business. We have a regulatory update. And Tim, I see you on Zoom. Welcome.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Vice Chair Melendez. Thank you, members, for the opportunity to present to you all again. My name is Tim Windle. I'm a partner at the law firm Keys and Fox. Next slide, please. So we'll talk about two items today, both of which present good news. The first is the Energy Resource Recovery Account, or the ERA forecast case. And the second is SDG&E's Phase 1 General Rate Case. Next slide, please. So the ERA case sets your PCIA rates. So if you don't mind, we'll hit a very quick refresher on this issue. The PCIA rates result from taking the revenue requirement that's in that green circle on the right there, dividing it by a load forecast to get $1 per kilowatt hour rate. There are two ingredients that go into that revenue requirement. The first is the forecasted indifference amount, which looks ahead to 2025 and compares the cost of SDG&E's portfolio in 2025 to the market value of that portfolio in 2025. And then the second is the year-end balance, which is that gray circle. That is a true-up of last year's forecast compared to the actual costs and the actual market value that SDG&E is seeing right now. Next slide, please. So in order to get the indifference amount, we look at that top equation. That's the cost minus the market value, gives you the indifference amount. But the real story today is that bottom equation down there. Those three benchmarks, the energy index, the RPS adder, and the RA adder, make up the market value of the utilities portfolio. On October 4th, the Commission's Energy Division published updated versions of those benchmarks. In those updated versions, compared to the benchmarks from last year, the energy index went down pretty substantially by 25%. However, the RPS adder went up significantly by 72%, meaning the value of renewable energy in SDG&E's portfolio is forecasted to be 72% higher than last year. The value of capacity, in particular, what's called the system RA adder, went up by a large amount. It essentially tripled from $15 per kilowatt month to $45 per kilowatt month. So with those updated benchmarks, the RPS adder and the RA adder pretty significantly outweigh the decrease in the energy index. So you have the market value of SDG&E's portfolio increasing significantly, which, as we'll see in a moment, brought PCIA rates down. Next slide, please. In fact, the RA adder went up by so much that the Commission was wringing its hands a little bit with worrying whether something was wrong with those benchmarks. It asked for comments from parties regarding whether there should be additional procedural mechanisms to prevent any potential over or under collections, since those over or under collections can lead to rate volatility once we get to the year-end PAVA balance, the true-up. We replied to that ALJ ruling and said no special circumstances require that right now. First, looking at customers' rates, there's not a lot of rate volatility here. And second, the market is the market. The value of those attributes is very high. You can ask Dan Peckham if he's at the meeting today. System RA is very expensive right now. And the cost of renewable energy credits is really high right now. So the commission built this process on the market. The market is high. No special steps should be taken. On October 21st, SDG&E filed what's called the October update. What they do is they take their May testimony from this case, they plug in those new benchmarks, they change some of their assumptions based on some things that they have sold, attributes they've sold or attributes that they've had to purchase. And we get a new refreshed forecast of what rates will be in 2025. Next slide, please. And this is what those rates look like. So going across the top row there, you see vintages on the left. So you have bundled customers, and then you have the 4 vintages that matter most to Clean Energy Alliance, 2017, 2020, 2022, and 2023. And then you have what are the current rates, the rates that are forecasted in the October update, the increase and decrease to those rates, and then whether PCIA rates this year will be a cost or will be a credit. And to a large extent, these rates proved what we had told to the ALJ, proved it up. Essentially, bundled customer rates are staying the same. You see an increase there by 1/100th of a cent. And so there's not a lot of rate volatility that the commission needs to worry about. And then for you all, because the market value of the portfolio went up by so much, Solana Beach will see a half-cent decrease to their PCIA. Vintage 2020, that's Carlsbad and Del Mar, will see 2-cent reductions to their PCIAs. And then Escondido and San Marcos, Oceanside and Vista will all see 4.3% reductions to the PCIA. So you can see on the far right, the market value now outweighs the cost. So we have negative PCIA rates forecasted for nearly all of your customers in 2025. One last thing to note here is that these rates will change again. So SDG&E is still working on that second ingredient to the PCIA revenue requirement. That's the 2024 year-end balance. So on November 15th, they'll file an advice letter that will true up the months of September and October. And then on December 31st, they'll file an advice letter that will true up the month of November. So these rates will change, but this is a pretty strong indication of where these rates will be on January 1st, 2025. Next slide, please. So moving on from the air forecast case, the other big update here comes in SDG&E's Phase 1 general rate case. As a quick reminder, a Phase 1 general rate case asks how big the pie should be. That is, what is the revenue requirement SDG&E needs in order to cover its cost and earn its return on equity? And then this Phase 2 general rate case asks, okay, how do we divide that pie among different customer groups, residential, industrial, commercial? Back in August, when I was at the meeting in person, we discussed vintaging. Carlo Bencomohasso came from NewGen, and we talked about this idea of there being no forever PCIA assets. So when new generation assets are added to SDG&E's portfolio, those should not be your responsibility because that procurement is now taking place on behalf of SDG&E's bundled customers. And existing assets should roll out of the PCIA at the end of their useful lives. So the Phase 1 GRC is one of the places in which we prosecute this question. So taking a look at the bullets here, the main issue that we engaged on in this case was the proposed cost of an investment to increase capacity at Miramar by 20 megawatts with energy storage. SDG&E had proposed that because it's an add-on to an existing asset, those costs should go into 2004 and 2008 PCIA vintages, which would mean all of your customers would pay for that storage. In addition, we advocated for the adoption of a vintaging framework at the commission. We received a proposed decision on this case on the 18th, and that proposed decision denies outright the upgrade to the Miramar facility and notes that the 20 megawatt battery storage system at Miramar would constitute a major upgrade to the existing facilities, and states that review and consideration of vintaging would need to be addressed if SDG&E decides to bring that project back before the commission in a new application. The proposed decision declines to adopt the PCIA vintaging framework we put forward, noting that this is an issue of concern that has been raised in a number of dockets, and so the commission opines that it should be addressed in a statewide proceeding as opposed to this proceeding specific to SDG&E. It does state that SDG&E should carefully consider the merits of vintaging if it does decide to modify existing assets. Next steps in this case would be comments on that proposed decision, which are due 1 week from today on November 7th. And then in addition, we have oral arguments on this proposed decision next week up in San Francisco. Next slide.
Thank you, Tim. Questions from the board? Go ahead.
Tim, did you get a feeling that the decision will likely go in favor of the CCAs? Or will there be some deference to the major utilities? Because they'll all be impacted.
With regard to the proposed decision on the phase 1 general rate case?
Yes, thank you.
It's unclear at this time. I think we'll get a better sense of that once we have comments from the utilities on the proposed decision. We'll be submitting our own comments on this proposed decision. And then, you know, we'll get some hints as well from oral argument and what happens there, but it's unclear right now whether or not this will survive the comment process at the commission.
So in theory, as the vintages mature and the contracts are no longer in place, the argument for the utilities would be there's still a PCIA because we're still improving existing infrastructure that you're benefiting from. And our argument is, well, we've satisfied the terms of the contract. You now have assumed new, let's say, customers that are outside of the CCAs. It's now your responsibility. Is that it in a nutshell?
That's it in a nutshell. We would, in addition, say any further investments you're making now, you're making on behalf of those customers that remain with you. You're no longer making those on our behalf.
Thank you.
Great. Other questions? Go ahead, Katie.
Yeah, I would, expand upon that. Just curious if we can anticipate what those comments and arguments would be. As much as I hope that we get a ruling that those investments are truly being made on behalf of those SDG&E customers, is there a way for them to argue that we're benefiting from those enhancements?
Yes, in fact, that's what they did argue. So this issue was rather intensely litigated between the parties. So we cross-examined their witnesses. There was extensive briefing on this issue. So we have a good sense of what those arguments are going to be from SDG&E. That certainly was one of their arguments, was that this benefits the system and this benefits everyone.
So when would we get a final ruling on that part?
So right now, the earliest commission decision at which this proposed decision can be considered is the December 4th commission meeting. And then there is also the December 19th commission meeting if there's no resolution by December 4th.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions? Kalen, any of the members of the public wish to comment on this?
We do not have any speakers for this item.
Okay, well, any comments anybody would like to make?
If I could, I just
Yeah.
wanted to make a correction, not a big one, but I just noticed it. If you could back up to the PCIA slide. Yeah, there, right back, no. The table. Forward, there you go. So the increase and decrease for the two vintage years, 2022, 2023 are not identical. In fact, the 2022 vintage was the one that dropped the most, and it's actually 0.04724. Now, it's a small difference, but I just wanted to point out that that was an error, that those two are the same. So in fact, the 22 vintage decreased the most.
But the 1.91 cents for the 22 vintage is correct?
That's correct. The 1.91 cents is correct. It's just the amount of decreases was incorrect.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Greg.
So, some maybe we hope good news for San Marcos, Escondido, Vista, and Oceanside. So you're going from the biggest PCI to Oceanside and Vista to the smallest PCI, which is very nice. That's the, well, the assumption at this point is San Diego Gas and Electric is getting rid of their obligations. And as they get rid of their obligations, we don't have to pay as much. And in turn, we can be charging our customers based upon what we're paying for electricity, not what San Diego Gas and Electric paid in the past.
I'm actually surprised at how quickly in this process we're anticipating those costs to come down.
Well, the other end of that is we are buying some of that power.
That's right.
So we get some benefit from that. So with that, we go on to amendment number 1 to the renewable power purchase agreement with Cape Generating Station number 1 LLC.
Thank you, Chair, members of the board. You may recall that this item was before you at your last meeting.
I'm
and-
sorry. I skipped one. We're on the amendment to the Community Advisory Committee policy, which is item 5. I skipped item 6, so.
Okay,
That's
I
why.
guess I
that's
was
why-
reading
that's
it,
why
so I
I
didn't
only
pay-
have one more meeting.
okay, thank you. So this item is item 5, and it is policy amendments to the Community Advisory Committee. This was heard by the board at its last meeting. I will say between that time and this time, we did present these amendments to the Community Advisory Committee at their October 8th meeting. General consensus was provided on most of the amendments, and the issue at hand generally focuses on the selection of the chair. As you may recall, that we're looking to amend the policy, both to align the CAC policy with the board policy for selection of the chair for the advisory committee. And again, the board did support most of the amendments proposed at its last meeting. And the discussion was focused primarily at the board as well on how to select the chair for the CAC. Currently, the board policy requires or asks that board appoint a board member alternate to serve as the chair. Excuse me, where the community advisory policy does not have that provision. So in order to provide the most flexibility with how the Community Advisory Committee chair is selected, staff has proposed an option whereby the board would, as its first option, select a board alternate to be the chair of the CAC. If there is not a board alternate available to serve in that role, then the board would appoint a member of the board to be a chair. Similarly, if there's not a member of the board that is available to serve in that capacity, then the board would direct the committee itself to appoint the chair. That provides great flexibility. It's somewhat of a tiered structure of how to appoint the chair, and this is just a recommendation. Again, the CAC itself did not have a clear consensus on how to appoint the chair. I think they did feel there was some value in having a member of the board serve as the chair, whether that be a board alternate or a board member. However, I think if the board chose to direct the authority to the committee to appoint their own chair, they would be happy to do that as well. So that's where we stand. And again, the other amendments that deal with the vice chair term, the term limits of the CAC members, the provision that allows CAC members to not term out, those were all supported by the board at this last meeting. So there you have it, and I'm available to answer any questions.
Any questions for Greg? Any members of the public that would like to comment on this?
We do not have any speakers for this item.
Okay. Any board discussion?
Oh, I'm just curious if our CAC, group, if they are very active and engaged. I know our representatives in Vista really love participating. I'm favorable to allowing the committee to choose their own chair. I think that having someone be able to be empowered in that position can be helpful, but I also see how it's helpful to the committee to have another member, right, an alternate member serve as the chair. But I really would only see the value in that if they really needed that support, right? If they didn't feel like they could chair the committee themselves. But if the committee feels like they can chair themselves, then I would be supportive of letting them pick their own chair. So I would love to hear what everyone else thinks.
Great point. If we had an alternate board member as the chair, we wouldn't almost necessarily have to have that alternate board member at our meetings to convey what the board, you can see what's on paper, but you have to listen to the meeting to kind of get the feel for what's happening. And then that really places an imposition on an alternate. I would think that they would be at least zooming in publicly without, the privilege of speaking, but maybe my hopes are a little high. And I do think some degree of autonomy, since they are the voice of the community, is probably not a bad idea. Allow them amongst their group to select their own chair.
Yeah,
And then that chair can come to our meetings.
support that.
Go ahead, Christian.
Yeah, I agree. I know our representatives in Escondido are pretty active. I think providing them autonomy is appropriate. I just want to echo what you guys said. So I think I'm in agreement.
I think what I heard though is at the CAC meeting is that they wanted a board member to attend their meetings. And so I like the flexibility of this, and it might just turn out that the CAC does choose their own chair. But I think as a policy, I think that we might want to hang on to what was suggested by staff so that we have a flexibility to go down the line. And we might just have a whole new board up here that in come January that we just don't know about. So I wouldn't mind just having a policy that was staff recommended to go down the line in an order of an alternate or a board member, and if not, a CAC member.
Eric, any comment?
If we had an alternate, would it make it, they're chairing the meetings but not voting? I guess I'm asking if it makes it an even number or odd number.
That's a good question. The current framework, previously with an alternate, you had 15 members. And so there was an odd number of members. It is a voting member, so that member does vote. If the committee appointed the chair, there'd be a 14-member committee, but keeping in mind that there's few sort of direct votes that we take in terms of policy issues, I think it would be rare that we'd have a split, in which case, even if we did, we would come to the board and say the advisory committee voted 7-7.
Okay.
Would it be an easier answer if they elected their own chair, vice chair, and then between the two of them, one of them comes to our board meetings and sits here and listens and then can report back at their meetings?
It can always be requested. I can't speak for the CAC members themselves, but they're also doing this as a voluntary capacity. So that could be something we'd encourage for sure.
To speak to your point, Christy, I appreciate that the CAC members, that they want that support. But I also want to make it clear that I wouldn't want to require them to be chaired by a different member, right? So I think that there's maybe a transition period where the body was new for an amount of time. And as the volunteer members were getting their bearings and gaining those responsibilities, they especially benefited from an alternate member being the chair. But what I would like to see is that there's a transition where they can eventually chair themselves, partially because of leadership development. I do believe in leadership development, and I want residents and citizens to be able to have those leadership experiences, but also because of the comments earlier about how an alternate might not be as engaged with CEA ongoings as a CAC member would be, right? I mean, I know our alternates are all very passionate. We've got a very passionate alternate here.
But most of our alternates are, serving in other areas and they're there to fill in a little bit more. So I think that we've had a unique experience with alternate serving as chair previously, where we've had just some really great supportive leadership there. But in terms of the long term, I would love to see our CAC group be able to develop that leadership a little bit more. But I'm good with their recommendation. If they want to have an alternate continuing to chair, I would support that.
Maria, do you have any comments?
No, I'm in the middle of a cough attack. I'm so sorry.
So initially, the reason there was an alternate was because there were only 3 members of the board. And so all the alternates also had to step up. So it would be, well, the way I'm looking at this is we have advisory committees in the city of Del Mar, and I assume everybody does. And there are liaisons to those advisory committees. And I think it's important that the board have some type of representative at the community advisory committee meetings, just so there's somebody there that can answer questions, give a sense of what the board may want, and also to be able to pass that on to the board in a more organized manner. I think this gives us a whole lot of flexibility right now. Next year, we can take a look at it. You all can take a look at it again. And, so let's see what happens here. Maybe there will be no member of the board that wants to be it, no alternate that wants to be it, and it will default to the CAC to pick their chair.
That's right. CAC meetings will take place bi-monthly.
Yes, that is right. And that's currently the schedule. And so the amendment for the CAC policy is that it doesn't say that. So that's the schedule they're currently on, and that's the schedule that we would put into the policy.
I believe the feedback we got was monthly meetings there was just insufficient information. So they thought every other month.
Correct.
Be a little more productive.
Yeah, the policy says quarterly. And so they felt like bi-monthly would be, to your comment, that there's enough policy issues and information or work that bi-monthly would work instead of quarterly.
Okay.
Question.
Go
I
ahead.
appreciate that CAC benefits from a liaison, right? And that the alternate board member serves as a liaison essentially. If we do get into a scenario where the committee is chairing themselves, who would act as a liaison? Would it be someone amongst our staff?
That's a good question. I think there's 2 answers. One that Board Member Musgrove mentioned, we would either ask the chair to be a party to the board meetings, or it would come by way of staff. So it would be me.
Okay, thanks.
Very good. Can I have a motion?
Before we do that real
Oh.
quick, I just want to, I actually agree that I think we should be moving in the direction of self-chairing the meetings. And I think for me, I'm just thinking ahead of, we're going to start seeing programs and stuff coming forward that we want them to be independent of a single city. And I think no matter how gracious all of our wonderful alternates are, there is a distinction in a feeling. So I think in the future, I don't think it's as big a deal this year. Revisiting it next year is fine, but I think it does make sense for them to self-chair in the future.
I just have one quick point. If we could go back real quickly to that last slide. The subset of the 3rd bullet. I wonder how many of our city councils are aware that this is in the bylaws, the policy, because we make our appointments, at least in San Marcos, every 2 years. That includes council, and some of our committees are 3-year terms, some of them are 2. But if we go to replace this CAC member and they step up and say, no, the policy says I can stay, I think it becomes problematic unless we put the qualifier at the end for reappointment from their governing body or something like that. They have to apply with their cities, not with us. So we need to make sure that they understand that we're not trying to trump what the different cities want to do with their local representatives.
And if the board is comfortable with that addition, we can certainly add that.
So, on the appointment process comes through, the CEA, not the city. Isn't that correct? We go out and ask for appointments on CAC.
That is true. I don't know that cities could individually have their own process internally as well. I'm just not familiar with each
But
city's.
that's what we did with our
protocols.
two current. The CEA made the announcement. They then, at the particular time, my alternate and I each identified one of the two, each picked one of the applicants. And then those two names I brought forward for approval, and kind of a perfunctory moment because nobody else will know who they are. But that's how we did it 2-3 years ago.
We had a similar process where myself and an alternate, we made recommendations based on who.
We don't make it political, but we do need to know that the city council and the city manager specifically knows who from the community is speaking on behalf of the city at the CAC.
And to be clear, the current process though it's a CEA process. So applications do come to the city. Again, I was responding to that question. If there's a separate process by which some of those applicants come to CEA to apply, then that's up to them. But we just take the applications, review them, vet them, and then select those candidates.
Well,
Hopefully I'm not saying anything that's outside the policy.
We went through this process. It was the board that made the selections, but it was at the nomination process for the several board members or the representatives from their cities. So those applications were eventually brought to the representative from Escondido, Solana Beach, and what have you.
Right, in that there was no application for the CEA board to approve that wasn't previously passed along from a council member or
Yes.
a representative from
Yes.
another city.
So that there's no point of friction, I guess, is the best thing.
I think what we need to make sure is there's two ways to get on the CAC, it looks like. One is you apply to CEA, the member approves that, shall we say, and they get appointed, or they apply to the CEA sends that to the member then goes to their council and gets approval of it.
I think we would be better served if we followed what is effectively the Sandag model, where they notice the different cities or regions. If it's a North County position, you have a position that's coming open. So amongst yourself or with your city, you need to identify a person and then give us the name of that person when you have decided it. So transportation, public safety, different groups within Sandag have different nominating processes, but they all go back to the constituent cities to identify who they want. I don't know that it's really the CEA's per se prerogative to decide who represents individual cities. It's those cities' responsibility. So I think it's best that the cities manage the application
I
process.
agree, but I will say that the representatives that we're recommending, right, as individual cities, I wouldn't ever expect a city to go back to their council, right, and get approval of a CAC member, right? There's nothing really ruling from how I make those recommendations to CEA.
We do it all the time. In fact, we'll be doing that in our December meeting. We take applications for all the representative subcommittees, planning, traffic, budget review.
Including CEA as well?
No, because it was
Okay.
kind of an off-the-cuff decision last time. Sorry, go ahead, Greg.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Just as a point of clarification, I think I misspoke. The CEA board nominates the member from the applicants. So they nominate the applicants for their respective city. Barb Boswell was closely involved with this policy. Barb, if you have anything to add to this discussion, feel free. Barb, you're muted.
She has her hand up. Do
We have
her
to
open?
call on her.
To be unmuted?
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Chair Druger and Vice Chair Melendez and board members, I'm happy to provide the background here. So the practice that we did in the past for soliciting interest in volunteering for the Community Advisory Committee is that CEA does put out the applications. We do ask the cities to assist with spreading the word to get encourage their community members to apply. Once we have the applications, we do provide them to the board member and alternate of the city that the representatives are from. And then the board member will review the applicants and then bring forward their recommendation for appointment to the CEA board. And then the CEA board votes to appoint the CAC member.
Thank you. And I think that still may render so applicable the question you asked about the addition to this language. Typically what we were trying to get to is that if a board member wishes to continue serving, this was to eliminate the term limits, because we do sometimes have challenges getting enough people interested in this. So if a member wants to continue serving, they don't term out. They can continue, but they have to reapply. And so as part of that reapplication process, the board member and alternate from each city would still be a part of that applicant. For example, if that applicant, for whatever reason, there was somebody else in your community that you wanted to give a chance to serve on the board member and alternate could recommend a different candidate at that point.
So then it would be necessary that every 2-year cycle that the notice comes out, that current CAC member would just be one of any number of applicants, hopefully.
That's correct.
Yeah, okay, that sounds great.
Okay, any further discussion?
Yeah, I think it kind of sounds like I might be the only one that was kind of pushing for the policy, and I don't mean to be pushing for that policy. So if you all, the majority of us, feel like the CAC wants to pick their own leader, I'm perfectly fine voting for that as well. So if we'd like to make a motion in that direction, I'm fine with that as well.
Well, it
Just
sounds
wanna-
like we're all supportive of CAC picking their own chair, and I don't know if CAC is aware of that, right? If they, as a body, they need to be empowered to do that. Otherwise, they'll kind of accept what we recommend for them. So to Greg, what has the CAC expressed in terms of, have you heard from them that they want the support of kind of an alternate liaison per se?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Vice Chair. So the discussion at the last board meeting was similar to this. There were different varying opinions about this, and I think some voiced support for having the CAC chair be a member of the committee, and others felt that having a board member or board alternate would be helpful. There was even a suggestion that a board member or board alternate be the vice chair of the committee. And so it was really kind of, there were varying opinions. I think they would be, frankly, I think they would be supportive of what the board decides here. I think if the board said we would directed that the committee select their own chair, I think they'd be happy with that. I think the key is, as has been discussed here, the liaison between the CAC and the board. I think there's a good suggestion that the chair, would be asked or encouraged to attend the board meetings, or at least have some sort of interaction with the board at some level, so that there's a connection there, that the relationship is being preserved, and the advisory capacity of the committee is and that integrity of that relationship is held up. So it's a long way of saying I think they'd be fine with the board directing them to select their own chair, as long as there's that interaction between the two.
Right, if we think that they're ready for that responsibility. And the other part of it too is, what type of policy change would we need to make in order to require a chair of CAC to participate in our regular meetings?
That could be a part of the CAC policy, and there's a operating policy, correct, for the CAC that could be modified.
That's a larger obligation.
That is
That's
a
my
larger-
only
so-
kind of drawback here.
And it may, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, they can identify whoever they want as a liaison as long as there's some reliability that they'll come to the meetings. Or they can zoom in and listen to the meeting remotely. Because they're not going to be a voting member, but they can certainly listen in, take their notes, and then at their CAC meeting, report back.
I mean, if we think that they're ready to chair their own committee,
I think they
I'm
are. They're
supportive.
adults. They know what to do.
If our staff is able to provide additional support in the absence of an alternate member, I would make a motion that we allow CAC to pick their own chair.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion?
If I could, there may be other policies that would need to be amended to reflect that. So if the motion maker is so inclined to direct staff
Yeah.
to amend the policy to be consistent with the motion, that would be much appreciated.
That would be great.
Thank you.
The seconder?
Yes, as long as we get a report back if there are any significant changes to collateral policies. Other than administrative processes.
Will do.
Great, thank you.
Okay. So again, any further discussion? Will you please call the roll, Kalen?
Yes, and I will note for the record that Board Member Bob Patel left at 2:59 PM.
Okay.
Board Member Garcia,
Aye.
Board Member Becker.
Yes.
Board Member Musgrove,
Aye.
alternate Board Member Joyce.
Aye.
Vice Chair Melendez,
Aye.
Chair Druker.
Yes. Okay, so we also wanted, do we want to remove the term limit for CAC members? Okay, so I have a motion on that.
Yes, so moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, will you please
Can I-
call, oh, go
Can I
ahead.
ask a question before we leave the item? Should we make it, if we're gonna make it so it's an expectation or ask that we have a liaison from the CAC, I would like it to be more formalized where they have a spot on the agenda to give a report about the CAC meeting and for them to feel welcome as part of the group. So we sometimes have those liaisons sit in these areas or however it would be, but I would just have staff consider that. And I don't know if you need formal action on it or not, but I think that connection is really the important piece that everybody's trying to get at with all of our volunteerness.
We could discuss it internally, similar to the motion that was made, what would be required.
Okay, we've had a motion and a second to remove the term limits. Will you please call the roll?
Board Member Garcia,
Aye.
Board Member Becker,
Yes.
Board Member Musgrove.
Aye.
Alternate Board Member Joyce, Vice Chair Melendez.
Aye.
Chair Druker.
Yes. Okay, now we go on to item 6, which is the amendment to the renewable power purchase agreement with Cape Generating Station 1 LLC.
Thank you, Beef. Just wanted to introduce this. This is the geothermal project PPA, and I'll introduce Dan Peckham to give the presentation. Dan.
Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, board members.
We're going to go right to questions and discussions, Dan. You did such a great job.
Yeah, straight to questions. So item 6 here is an amendment to this Cape Station PPA geothermal long-term power purchase agreement. Recommendation is approval of the amendment and authorize execution of it. Going into the background for this item, it's been discussed in past board meetings, but this is a long-term power purchase agreement that brings a new portion of a geothermal facility online. CEA is the off-taker for this. It's a slice of this Cape Station project, and our contract is matched along with a couple of other CCA joint procured and entered into it for a total of about 20 megawatts originally of project for this geothermal facility. The counterparty here is Cape Station. The project's being developed by and this project came through an RFP we ran a number of years ago. And it was part of trying to meet our midterm reliability requirements to bring new capacity online. And specifically, one component of those requirements is clean, firm, 24/7 renewable resources. So this project met CEA's total requirement under that midterm reliability clean, firm need. And so we executed this back in September of 2022. Now, PURBO has come to us asking for an amendment to that original PPA. We started speaking with them and negotiating this a couple of months ago, but I've gone through that process now. This slide on the screen right now outlines the key changes, but it is moving the operations date for the project from mid 2026 to the start of 2031. There's also a price increase that they requested and other various minor tweaks to align different contract process. But really those first two ones are the key. What they've indicated in terms of their challenges with this are difficulties financing this project with us and a number of other CC counterparties, as well as challenges that they're having getting the equipment, large components of plant itself. And this was their request to push it back. And in return, I think the main thing that we also negotiated was, with this change, ideally we'd be getting a project like this online sooner. So if we're able to find something that meets our needs better than this, we have the ability to just walk this entirely before we start construction in 20. Happy to take questions on this from the group.
Yes. So you mentioned 2028. Do we have a date when we are then at that point obligated?
Yeah, it's the start of 20.
So it's at the start of construction identified to be in 2028. So is there a hard date or is it the start of construction and whenever that date happens to be?
It's the hard date.
Okay. Do we know what that date is?
That one I think is in the sort of confidential excerpts from the actual sort of files that are presented to you, but
The CEO has the date? Okay, fantastic. So then, okay, so I have comments, but thank you anyway.
Just at this point, we think that $900,000 is still a good deal for us.
I mean, if you look at what, well, first off, I'll say this, we continue to run RFPs looking for, and we've specifically said we're looking for projects that are
A better deal.
expanding our types of resources, such as geothermal, and they're very difficult to find that submit to RFPs that we run. The price increase is, significant, but it's compared to what we've anecdotally heard prices are, it's in.
Okay. And yeah, okay, thank you.
So, yeah, and that's a 28 lock on a proposed 31 delivery. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Are there any members of the public who wish to speak to this item?
We do not have any speakers for this
Okay.
item.
Any further questions or comments?
I would just like to see a very aggressive search for alternates to this. And if we can look at what we're paying now per kilowatt hour and try and plug that into the $900,000 increase, what does that mean to us for the amount of energy we think we'd need, adding that additional cost? Because it's going to be a pass through to the customer. So while we may hit target goals, we can't go broke in the process. So I'm looking for as many alternatives as we can get, even if it's not a single provider. If we can still meet the goals that we have, I would like to see those options.
Other comments? Just, we did want to enter this market, the geothermal market, because it's a much better market than solar, because it's 24/7. Yeah, I assume the staff will be aggressively looking for a replacement of that, because that's a whole lot of the future is geothermal. Although having looked at energy prices very recently, I think we did on Tuesday morning, they're not going down. So the $900,000 may be even a bargain for 2031 at this point. So,
Well, it's just insulting too that they took us out and put the utility Edison in. I mean, that's annoying too, so.
yep. So do I have a motion to adopt resolution number 2024-20?
Move to approve. And
So-
if I could also make
Go.
one more comment that, from briefing on this with you, Greg, it sounded like Edison had some really good PR around this deal that completely ignored the fact that our little fish got kind of swallowed up. So I would just want to advocate for our organization that we're, making sure that we're putting our story out there wherever we can. We got kind of the sore end of the deal here, but we will have some good deals in the future, and definitely want to make sure that the press and media knows about the work that we're doing. So I'll move that we approve.
Okay, any further discussion?
Nope, I'll second.
Okay. Please call the roll.
Board Member Garcia,
Aye.
Board Member Becker,
Yes.
Board Member Musgrove.
Aye.
Alternate Board Member Joyce. Vice Chair Melendez.
Aye.
Chair Drucker.
Yes. Okay, we're on to now receiving the annual audited financial report for fiscal year ended 2024. I assume, Andy, you're going to introduce that?
I am. I would be on video, but my video has been stopped unless you want, if you don't need to see me, then.
Yeah,
no
we don't need
problem.
to, we'll assume that you're there, even though your name is only there.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, board members. We have, well, next slide, please. We have completed the audit for the year ending June 30th, 2024. This is the second year we used Pursuant and Brinker. Brett Bradford is the partner. You can see his picture along with two other members of his team, Alejandra and Alana. I just want to give you a little bit of a summary from a numbers standpoint before Brett walks you through his required communications. So overall, we had a clean opinion. There was one issue that I wanted to draw your attention to. The auditors have called this a material weakness, which in their definition is deficiency in internal control. It's the voluntary allocation and market offer, which is where we buy renewable energy from SDG&E, were not accrued at June 30th, 2023. There was a new CPUC program that began on January 1, 2023 to enable SDG&E to allocate RECs to CEA. There were issues in the implementation, which resulted in our late receipt of those invoices, and not until October. So it was kind of after the audit was complete. This was an isolated one-time event, but when this year, when we went through the audit, we proactively, so CEA proactively proposed the restatement to the auditor and elected to restate. And we have now implemented complete procedures for appropriate accruals going forward. And by the way, I'll note one thing, that these high costs, which resulted in substantial higher costs in the restatement, were are sort of offsetting issue that Tim Lindell was talking about earlier, which is the PCIA went down because of high market value for the RECs that SDG&E sells to other parties. And CEA is one of those parties that pays high REC prices and RA prices for products that are transferred and allocated from SDG&E. Next slide, please. Also, when we last talked to the board about the end of the year budget estimate, when we were going through the budget review and budget approval, the actual financials were only through April. So we were doing an estimate through June. And we estimated, as I said, financials for the remainder of those May and June period. The estimated VAMO impact, which is the same one, was not yet included in the year-end forecast, and they ended up being higher than we had estimated. So we, as part of this whole changing the process and procedures of restatement, we also allocated or accrued an additional $4.4 million for the VAMO cost related to the January 1 through the June 30th period, so into the June 2024 period. So in addition to restatement of expenses that had been already incurred in the 24 period, moved back to 23, we had additional costs that were incurred in 2024 over and above that. Next slide, please. This is a picture of what we projected at the left, the three columns, what we projected to end the year at, and what the audited numbers were for this year that just ended. So if you look to the bottom, we had projected a change in that position of negative $2.5 million or close to that. And we ended up as a net negative $6.4 million. That difference is nearly $4 million worse. If you look on the far right column, our revenues were almost $2 million higher than we anticipated in that based upon April financials and our estimate. But the cost of energy was $5.7 million higher, of which the bulk of it, $4.4 million, was related to this extra VAMO expense, which we had not been able to anticipate. Well, we had an estimate, but our estimate wasn't high enough based upon the results that came out from SDG&E just a few weeks ago. Next slide, please. I also wanted to draw your attention to where we are, even though we had a worse, or we ended up accruing more and ended up the year-end 24 worse than we had anticipated. Our preliminary September 24, which is the month we just ended, so we hadn't finished them at the time of this slide package, but the first 3 months of FY 25, we have come in with a year-to-date change in net income of $44 million through September, compared to a budget of just $32.7 million. So about almost $12 million better. And our full year forecast of $43.7 million, which is slightly below the current $44 million. That's largely because we usually experience losses in the coming 4 or 5 months when we slip into winter rates. Those losses are expected to be less than normal, or had been last year, because of the recent approval of higher winter rates by the board. And for comparison, the prior year to date through September was $25.8 million, although the full year ended up being negative. So that just gives you an indication that the first quarter is usually positive, but we expect it to end the year, this full year, still being positive. And the forecasted FY 25 year-end net position as of today is approximately $26.7 million, which would offset all of the negative position that's been incurred for the last 3 years, and will start to enable reserves to be built based upon CEA's policy and CCA best practices. So let me just show you one more slide which summarizes this, what I just went through, and then I'll take any questions. So the far left is where we were preliminary. for September. So $128 million of revenues against a budget of almost 120 million, so $8.7 million better. And then all the way at the bottom, near the bottom, the change in that position preliminarily at 44 million against a year-to-date budget of 32.7 million, so $11 million better. And the full year forecast, which is all the way at the bottom, all the way across to the second to last column, shows an ending net position at the full year of 22.7 million, although that I will note is an error. Should have been 26.7, consistent with the slide on the prior page. But still, the full year forecast is expected to be positive and make up for all of the prior year negative net position. So while we have had 3 years of losses, this year is stacking up to be a makeup of all those prior years and put us in a good position for good financial growth and reserves and CCA best practices. After you ask any questions of this, Brett and his team will talk about the audit, and they have a series of required communications to the board that they want to walk you through, and that is part of a standard independent audit. But that it constitutes the end of my slides, unless you have any questions, and then we'll turn it over to Brett.
So does the board have any questions for Andy about current and past fiscal numbers? No. Andy, can you go back one slide? One more. No, go forward. Forward one. Back one. Okay, so other operating expenses, we were above, it's a small amount, but any specific reason, why we were above that on the other operating expenses?
No, there's no specific. It usually is just about timing of when conferences might have been incurred, or marketing expenses, or we had a pretty extensive printing and rollout expenses related to the expansion that the timing might have been slightly earlier than we had budgeted. But it's only 1%, and you're right, it's a small number. It's only 14,000. And the projection right now, the projection for the full year is that we might be 2% over. But my expectation is that full year forecast is probably conservative. So we'll probably end of the year at something slightly less than the 9.4 million that's shown there as the full year budget.
Okay, very good. So with that, Brett, you are up to talk to us about the audit.
Thank you.
Wait, and Brett there's another presentation that we'll put up.
Thank you, Mr. Stern, for your introductory remarks, and good afternoon, everybody. It's good to be back once again. My name is Brett Bradford. As mentioned, I'm a audit partner with Pursuant Brinker, and I'm here with my team this evening. So go back one if you could, please.
I think go back two.
I can go this fast if needed.
We're way too far. Whoever's advancing the slides needs to go back to the beginning. There we go.
If we could advance past the first slide there, please. Currently, again, back to our introductory remarks, we're working with several CCAs throughout California and have been involved kind of since the early days of CCAs in the state. And I'm lucky enough to have my engagement team on today, Alejandra Schaefer and Alana Rico. And Ali will take over for the speaking after I get a couple slides in. I think there's about 9 slides in total, so it should be pretty quick. The purpose of our presentation is communication, so please feel free to interrupt me with any questions during our presentation. So if we could advance, please. The audit is complete at this time and reported an unmodified opinion, which means that based on our audit, the financial statements are materially accurate. This is the good and desired outcome for an audit. We did note the material weakness as Mr. Stern described. He described it well, and I concur with some of the circumstances surrounding that. This doesn't involve cash. It's a technical accounting matter for accrual on the timing of recognition of expenses. And it was an unusual and one-time thing. Nevertheless, we are required to report that. So if you could advance, please. Quick revisit of the relative roles and responsibility for management and the auditor. Management is responsible for preparing the financial statements and establishing a system of internal control. And we as the auditors are responsible for preparing the audit. We can't be involved with preparing the financials or preparing the numbers, actually doing the accounting, because then we wouldn't be independent. So Mr. Stern and his team prepare the financials and we audit the financials. So if we could advance, please. Our audit is a risk-based audit as required by our standards. This includes getting an understanding of the entity's operating characteristics, practices, and procedures. We compare to our knowledge of similar entities, industry, and professional guidance. In the instance of CEA, we have the advantage of working with other CCAs throughout the state. So we have good benchmarks for comparison purposes and analytics. We review procedures and controls surrounding significant transaction cycles and business processes. If you could advance, please. And I think this is where I'm going to hand it off to Ellie. Take it away.
Thanks, Fred. So during our audit, some of the significant areas of focus were revenue recognition. Under this falls accounts receivable and accrued revenue. So we test a sample of customer billings. We relate total cash received during the year to revenue. We look at cash received subsequent to year end and relate it back to AR, and we review the revenue recognition through year end and the method for determining that for accrued revenue. Cash is pretty simple. We send confirmations directly to the financial institutions. If you can advance the slide, please. Accrued cost of electricity. We review our subsequent bills from electricity providers and cash payments. Supplier security deposits. We review the contracts and determine completeness of amounts recorded. And then financial statement note disclosures. We confirm that they're complete and without bias, which is a pretty big one. You can go to the next slide, please. This is some of the required board communication. This year, there were no material accounting policies adopted by Clean Energy Alliance throughout the period audited. There was no alternative treatments of accounting principles for material items in the financial statements that we discussed with management. Next slide, please. We didn't propose any adjustments to the financial statements, and we have not identified any significant or unusual transactions or applications that the accounting principles lacked authoritative guidance. You can expand, please. There were no disagreements with management concerning the scope of our audit, the application of accounting principles, or the basis for management's judgment, and we have not encountered any difficulties in dealing with management. This is something, if it had happened, we would have presented it much sooner than this communication now. If you can, thank you, and that's it. Is there any questions?
Yeah, I just wonder, and
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, and also back to Tim, the delay in receiving that rec, that impact the internal numbers and then ultimately affecting the audit results? Would that have made the difference? Greg? Or anyone really for that
I
matter?
assume you were directing that to me, but I'm not sure I totally understood the question.
Yeah, so the rec that was ostensibly due in Q2 didn't come in until September, but the audit period was in April. if that rec had been delivered on time, would have it affected the bottom line number and then ultimately the result of the audit for compliance?
Well, the, the restatement was not for 24. It was for, we took, when we received, their first invoice, when this was implemented back in October of 2023, that was after the 2023 audit, which was a year ago.
Okay.
And, and before we closed out this year's audit, we decided to take, and that was a pretty significant amount that got booked into October 2023, which was which should have been accrued back into June of 2023. So that was the restatement. Similarly, although they got their act together better than last year, the VAMO estimate on the CPUC published the actual final VAMO numbers just a few weeks ago, about 3 weeks ago. And it was, while it was a surprise at that time, it would have been nice to have had it sooner. It was at least soon enough to be able to accrue those expenses into this year's audit. So, and when we presented and hopefully I'm answering your question, but probably more wordy than you want. When we presented the year-end expectation and forecast back in April to this board, we had made an estimate of what that VAMO number would be. And it ended up being low, even though we thought we had estimated high enough, it ended up being low. And this is related to Tim's comment earlier, which is that rec costs have been exorbitantly high for the last year, and a lot of people most people have been surprised by the level that they've been. We thought we had accrued enough and estimated enough, but in the end we had not. But the problem, what we did last year to restate June of 2023 financials, we have fixed that problem this year by accruing all of the final numbers into the June 2024 financials, which was just audited. And so there won't be any carryover going into next year now. Did that answer your question?
It does. Thank you.
Other questions? Any members of the public that want to speak on this matter?
We do not have any public speakers.
Okay. Comments? Go ahead, Katie.
I'm happy to see that our audit went well, even if we had to course correct to make sure that our predictions are sound for the next year. But thank you for preparing all of this.
Yeah. Also would like to thank the auditors and Andy for finding the error, number one, and also correcting it. So with that, we just have to receive the report. So
actually, the board needs to vote to accept and adopt and approve the audit.
I don't think so, but Johanna, it's just is just to receive the report.
Yes, it says to receive the report as a formality. If so required or by the auditors, we may go ahead and formally accept the report by motion.
Okay.
I'll move to accept and file.
Any further discussion?
You're going to not accept it?
Okay, with that, will you please call the roll, Kaylin?
Board Member Garcia,
Yes.
Board Member Becker,
Yes.
Board Member Musgrove.
Aye.
Alternate Board Member Joyce,
Aye.
Vice Chair Melendez.
Aye.
Chair Druker.
Yes. Okay, are there any board member requests for future agenda items? Okay, so our next meeting is November 21st, 2024. It will be here. That will be the last meeting of the year. So with that, we are adjourned.
Thank you, Brett and team.